guns? Who manufactures?
Do you think that there's female gun makers all over the world or what?
Yeah,
bro?
who do you think was working production in World War II when all of our men were going overseas?
They weren't designing the guns. They were literally on an assembly line putting a fucking screw in a fucking piece of metal. They weren't designing weapons. What world do you live in?
That's great. And at the end of the day, both jobs matter. You could be the best engineer in the world. If you don't have somebody building your shit, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, that's nice. Women can be a labor force if men allow them to. That's fantastic.
Sure.
Destiny tried to go against Andrew Wilson, and he failed miserably. Let's take a look at this. Andrew Wilson is going to cook the flames out of him, and it's going to be insane.
Yeah, my biggest issue with Andrew is saying that we can't be in an egalitarian society. I think I guess like if you want to go off of like what you only know, saying that, you know, men have always worked hard. They've been the laborers of America. But I think that if you look at the stats now that men are no longer working and going to school. So I'm really curious as to how it can't be an egalitarian society if they're not putting in the work that they used to.
Well, because
what are they doing?
Because it necessarily can't actually be equal because there's no equalization of force. Women will always have to depend on men to enforce their rights, and they'll always have to depend on men to enforce their well-being. They'll always have to depend on men to make the enforcement for all of the things that they want and desire for themselves. They can't enforce those things on their own. They need men to enforce them for them. And men do not need women to enforce their own rights. They do not need women to enforce their own agendas. They don't need women for any of that. But women necessarily need men to do that for them.
Could I say it like this, maybe, Andrew? At the core fundamental, the basis of society, you need men willing to do violence in order to protect the rights of other people.
Well, it's not just that, though. So I want to be very clear with this. It's not just that you need to have aggressive men who are willing to conduct violence in order to keep a society together. It's that fundamentally women must depend on men to enforce their rights, period.
Got it.
Period. They have to. So egalitarianism, I think, even as a proposition, is false. I don't even think it's possible. I think from a foundational level, it's always going to be patriarchal due to this gap. And philosophers have talked about this for, basically 1,000 years. So have biblical theologians. And it's one of the huge gaps when you're talking about egalitarianism. How, for instance, Angela, how do you enforce your own personal rights absent men? Absent men collectively assisting you in doing that? How would you do that?
Well, I guess like, in what state are we living in that we constantly need men?
Anywhere you want. Any imaginary place that you
I'm living in America with this great citizenship that I have. I don't have to constantly live in fear that someone needs to enforce my rights. I'm living happily fine. So I'm just curious. So we continuously go back to that. And we say that men need to be there to protect us from what? Other men?
Yes.
Like, so the issue is like other men beating on other men. So this goes back to like the men's issue.
Yes. So men give women rights and men give other men rights. That's correct. Okay. So because they're the enforcement arm, they are going to be the people who deliver rights to women or take rights away from women or deliver rights to men or take rights away from men. So men are always going to be the dominants in force. And so therefore, they're always going to be the decider of who gets the rights. Can you think of an alternative system?
I'm sorry. So why are men failing in this current society?
They're not failing.
They're so failing, guys.
How are they failing?
Yeah, but you just said you were safe, Angela. So I don't know that they're failing, right? I don't know if that's...
It's just right now, we like the way that society works. We have a whole it's men don't do anything. It's the massive institutions that we've created around our countries that ensure rights. You don't get rights from men. You get rights from the protections that the institutions of government have guaranteed you, right? There are men in all sorts of different countries, but the rights that women have afforded them dramatically vary from country to country, regardless of what man is going to protect them. You know, you might have the strongest male defender ever in Afghanistan, but it doesn't mean you're going to college if you're a woman there. And also just when you compare country to country and you're looking for like, what are the most successful countries? It's not the ones with the most alpha men or the most manly men protecting the rights. It's generally you're looking for things like, do women have access to birth control and are they participating in the economy? So I don't know. It's just like, it's a very crude argument.
Well, there's a bunch of things that are kind of smuggled in there, right? So the first thing is kind of smuggled in is you talk about institutions being the protectors of rights. Institutions are just a coalition of people, individuals. They're going to rely on the enforcement arm also of men. You say it's not masculine men who are defending these rights. However, it is masculine men who are in the military, in law enforcement, things like this, who are the enforcement arm of these rights, who these government institutions rely heavily on in order to enforce what their will is. So it always does come down to enforcement.
Do you think then that the countries where women have the most rights are the countries with the most masculine, strong men?
So they're not mutually exclusive or non-exclusive.
I didn't say they're mutually exclusive. I'm asking because you make it sound like it's just strong men that grant rights. So does that mean that if I were to look at all the women's rights in the world,
there's a problem there? There's a smuggling again where you say strong masculine men are the only ones doing them. Just saying men is the default are the ones who are doing this.
Wait, but why do you say men are the default? Like we can run that back a little bit more reductively. Shouldn't it be 6 feet or taller men? Like don't all men that are 5'8" and lower get their rights from men that are 6 feet and taller?
No.
Why not?
Because they don't have a non-equalization on force. A 5'8" person can defend themselves against a 6 foot person.
In general, do you think that's true?
I think that there are some advantages, but if you're going to do that, then on average,
no, not some advantages. I'm saying on average, if we look at combat sports with no weight classes, do you think 5'8" men are defending?
Well, hang on. So if we're going to use averages, then let's use averages and say that we have an average for a reason because most men are inside of that average, right? So if that's true, then most of the men who would be falling in these jobs are going to be within that average, Destiny. So
sure, but I'm just
Destiny sounds insane, bro. Going based off of height, that's nuts. Nah, that's not how that works. There's people that are like short that still put in a crazy amount of quote unquote damage or effort to where height doesn't matter. I remember back when I was training MMA extremely actively, and my coach was a flyweight. This dude fought at I think 125 pounds. I was competing at heavyweight. When I say in the gym when we train, he used to dog walk me. I mean, he literally it was bad, super bad. Pick me up, slam me across. I didn't understand how he was that strong, and it made sense why he was the champion and eventually went to the UFC. He was strong as hell, bro. Didn't make sense, but he was so tiny, right? And then I would get him back because I'll slam him. And then you could see he felt it a little bit more. So I was like, okay, don't let his strength fool you, right? He's still tiny, but he's got the heart of a lion and he's strong as hell. So height wasn't really a factor necessarily. It was more so based off of the work that you put in. And I think that's what matters. There's a plethora of different types of jobs that it takes an extreme amount of masculinity to be able to do that short guys go in and they go in extra hard, right? They make a point to prove out of how they don't need height to be able to do what's necessary. It's not based off of height, right? And these are the type of men who end up usually protecting women's rights. Gotta call a spade a spade. Don't get mad at me, feminists. I know y'all upset. It's just the facts. You can't get mad at that. Destiny, he could get mad at that though. Because he a biatch.
Run this all the way back. So any man that's below the average height, any man that's 5'9" or lower, their rights are also being defended by men that are 6'2" and taller.
Well, no, that wouldn't be a direct correlate for equalization because men who are 6 foot, there's far fewer of them than men who are in the average aggregate. So therefore, the force equalization is different. However, if you're looking at the force differential from men to women, the average is so lopsided that even weak men can generally defend themselves fairly well against strong women.
If you want to do force equalization there, then shouldn't we be looking at people that prefer a heavily patriarchal society versus people that prefer a more egalitarian one? And the force equalization for women on the egalitarian one would be probably that most men would side with that over the ones that want the heavily patriarchal one?
Yeah, but that would go with my point, which is that men are the ones who are the rights givers.
But men aren't just the rights givers there, because a coalition of 5'9" and shorter men with women are probably going to defend rights more than a coalition of 6 foot plus alpha men.
The distinction there is that you said it yourself, it would be a coalition of men and women, but it'll never be women. So it'll always have to be men.
And it'll never be 5'8" and lower men, I don't think,
no,
right?
It will always be. The default will always go to men. Men can always enforce their rights collectively.
Okay, so you just want to arbitrarily cut it off at just men, but not go into any of the delineation.
I just went into every delineation with you. Which one would you like to go into?
I mean, I already said it. I think that you could argue that taller men are the ones that run society, and shorter men only exist in society essentially at the behest of larger men, basically.
Yeah, but we just covered this. That's true. You could say that, but if you're looking at an average, then you're saying that the men who are outside of the average are fewer in number than the men who are in the average. So they're outnumbered. So I don't know what your point is.
I mean, it could be the slightly taller men could probably take on 1.5 shorter men. I'm sure we could find some average where 30% of men in society can run the other 70%.
And it's still
just like
men.
nobody looks at,
And it's
yeah,
still men.
Sure.
That's the
Yeah,
point.
it is men, but now I'm going into height. But you want to go back on just the man, the fact that it's like the man thing. But again, and to go very broad, because now, I mean, I feel like we kind of see how ridiculous the argument is, and just like saying just men, just men, just men.
I haven't
like,
heard you refute it.
Broadly speaking, right, it's hard to refute because it's almost unfalsifiable, because you're talking about half the population of the planet, right? Like, how am I supposed to refute that men are important in voting rights? There are no countries that exist without men. But when I try to think of like, well, what's the refutation of this? Here would be an interesting thing. Do the countries with the strongest men have the most rights? Not really, no. In fact, just the opposite. I remember hearing so many jokes about how because Russia is so masculine and manly that all the trans Ukrainian soldiers were going to be getting murdered by the brave Russian soldiers. And here we've got drone operators, tossing grenades on Russian troops blowing themselves, right? So it doesn't seem to be the case that like just strong men are the predictor of rights.
So hang on, wait a second.
Go for it.
So men can take your rights away in those other countries too?
No, not just men. Those countries can take your rights away. You need a whole
using
institution.
The enforcement arm of who? Which sex do you think's the enforcement arm?
Countries are powered by men and women. When the Soviet Union
is the enforcement
Nazi
arm?
Germany, when the Soviet, it's not just about the enforcement arm. Who's giving them the arms to enforce?
Usually other men.
Who manufactures the guns? Who manufactures?
Do you think that there's female gun makers all over the world or what?
Yeah,
bro?
who do you think was working production in World War II when all of our men were going overseas?
They weren't designing the guns. They were literally on an assembly line putting a fucking screw in a fucking piece of metal. They weren't designing weapons. What world do you live in? That's great.
And at the end of the day, both jobs matter. You could be the best engineer in the world. If you don't have somebody building your shit, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, that's nice. Women can be a labor force if men allow them to. That's fantastic.
Sure. And what I'm saying, you can say if men allow them to, however you want to say it or whatever, but the reality is at the end of the day, it's not just men, right? You need both halves of society working together to actually fucking accomplish anything. So there is no society or country that's like...
You're smuggling in just men again. You're smuggling in just men. What I'm saying to you specifically is that men are the enforcement arm, and nobody's building shit if men say no. That's what I'm saying. Women aren't going to be able to go to men and say, no, you know what? We're going to do it anyway if men don't want them to, Destiny. That's the distinction.
Well, I disagree with what you're saying because I understand what you're saying. It sounds great on paper, but if we again look at the stats right now, the suicide rates are up. Men are dying. Men aren't going to school. They've dropped out of school during COVID.
Yeah, but Angela, the point of the patriarchy wasn't to just do the point of the what do you say? The patriarchy. It wasn't that all men do better. Because I've heard this argument before. Yes, men are going to commit suicide more because there's men at the bottom of society that are not benefiting from this patriarchy. Right? Does that make sense? So I've heard the argument before of like the idea that men are suffering isn't really the reason why the patriarchy isn't working. It's like the point he's trying to make is Andrew's guys, tell me if I'm wrong here. Andrew's trying to say that the foundation of society, there are men who have to enforce and to take certain jobs that have to do with military, law enforcement, etc. And what Destiny is saying is that while that is a part of society and probably a more important part of society in the past, today, it's a less important society because we have technology, because we have, someone who's a computer programmer, doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman, people can be successful entrepreneurs and be men or women. And I totally understand both parts of those. But my issue, the initial thing that I was saying before was that because men generally are more aggressive, they're going to fill more parts of more parts of that society, being entrepreneurs, being CEOs of companies, being in the U.S. military, being bodyguards, and stuff like that. So.
I think that.
Go ahead, Angela. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hear everything you guys are saying, but this all sounds like it's just like labor force jobs. But meanwhile, like the society is thriving off of multiple things that doesn't require you to just be like a fucking barbarian. So I don't understand why we continue to go back to the state of mind.
Because both things are important. Because both things are important, but it's completely just highlighted the fact that it's only men. But if you really look at it, women are thriving in it. Women are working more. 7.2 million men aren't working. So what are those men doing that they're contributing to the patriarchy that's so important that men can't enforce those guys who aren't working, who aren't doing shit? So I'm confused.
Wait a second. Women are only able to work in modernity the way that they are because men maintain the entirety of the infrastructure inside of every single nation on the planet. Women do not maintain infrastructure. Their top jobs are teaching, serving, things like this. They don't work in infrastructure. They don't work in paving the roads. They don't work with the air conditioners. They don't work with the electricity. They don't work with any of these things. At a very low scale, do they work in any of these industries? The scales are so lopsided that you almost can just take the women out because they're so irrelevant to most of these industries. So the thing is I got to ask you, like, You say women are doing all these great things. It's like they're all enabled by the patriarchal system, which literally has men competing with men, which we're supposed to be doing, and we love to do that for status, for all of these different things. But the entirety of the world that you live in currently, that women are thriving in, all of it is maintained by men, and very little of it is maintained by women.
Destiny had the nerve, the actual goal, to be sitting here talking about World War whatever. So yeah, well, all the women back 100,000 years ago, they were building stuff. That's not what's happening right now. If we're just being honest, there's a lot of masculine jobs that females do not want to work. It just is what it is. But for some weird reason, Destiny, a bunch of woke feminists, and a bunch of other crazies, they have it in their head that that's not the way things are. No, you're wrong. Like, if I'm just being honest, majority of the things that females are able to do currently, men had a hand in. Yeah, what you gonna do? Gonna get mad about it? For a woman to get the right to vote, men had to agree that women can vote, right? It's not hard to use logic and it comes to the right conclusion. But once again, if your Destiny and your level of wokeism is so extreme, like you have to argue with anyone who seems conservative or on the right. You got to just argue and disagree automatically just because that's just the way it is. No, it's not. I refuse to live like that. And when I see someone is doing that, especially because they think that I'm super on the right and conservative, I guess I would be defined as being on the right and conservative, but whatever. They'll see me as this and want to argue with anything I'm saying, even though I'm just using logic. It's weird. And I don't want those type of people around me, period. I don't want the idiocracy to rub off. Destiny, he's grifting and he's a simpleton as well. So that's why all these things don't apply to Destiny when it comes to the people I'm speaking to. My audience is intelligent. Destiny's a nincompoop. Go over there with those people that's crazy and stupid that I don't want to be around. I don't got time for it.
Do you think that in a society without men, women couldn't do these things? You're picking the most, not to sound mean, but you're picking the bottom. These are the bottom men of society. These are not to be mean, but these are the bottom of the
electricians are the bottom of society. That's interesting.
I'm sorry. Shout out to the U.S. Army.
I'm sorry. Electricians are building the roads.
I said the infrastructure, and yes, they are building the
electricians are building the most, and also yes, electricians are trade jobs would go underneath college jobs. You want to compare them to
why would they go underneath?
What's our Malagate award?
Why would they go wait, hold on. They're underneath because they require less training and they pay less.
They don't require less training.
They, by definition, require less training.
Then show me the definition where college degree means less training than a trade degree.
Because typically trades are something that you can train into in a shorter period of time than a more specialized college degree level job.
In fact, to go from a journeyman to a master takes many, many, many years of training, Destiny.
You're comparing a master. We're not talking about a 4-year degree grad holder as being a master. Who do you think makes more money, a master software engineer or a master electrician or carpenter?
Well, it depends on what the electrician is doing. If they're a master electrician, for instance, and they're working inside of a nuclear silo, I think that they're probably making a lot of fucking money.
Okay, if they're a master software engineer, their name is Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, he's going to make a lot of money, but that's an exception to the... Now, Zuckerberg, does he have a college degree? Didn't he drop out of college?
You're saying on exception, you think people in the trades make more money than people with college degrees?
If they're men... Yeah, often they do. Yes.
So in Destiny's mind, electricians are not important. Whoa. Whoa. Destiny is different. That's a strange individual that doesn't have any common sense. They're very important, bro. Extremely. Right? Any of those jobs is like a trade where they specialize in this thing that we desperately need. Yeah, you're bugging. But Destiny's not going to pay attention to reality. He's just trying to get whatever his woke points off. And there's going to be a bunch of people that follow him and believe it and act as if this dude knows what he's talking about when Destiny does not. Andrew Wilson just smoked him like he usually does. But tell me what you guys think down in the comment section. Hit the hype button, like button, and watch more videos. And if you want to see bonus content and maybe even live streams, check out my second channel, Exposed Extra, and follow me on Kick and follow me on Twitch.